Welcome to the EdTech Throwdown. Join us, Eric Geis and Nick Johnson, as we dive into today's best EdTech tools, tips, and practices. We do the research so you can teach your class. Remember to follow us on social media like Instagram, X, or Facebook by looking for the handle @EdTech Throwdown. Now please enjoy the show.
Welcome to the EdTech Throwdown. This is episode 191 called 10 Canva Code Ideas for Teachers. In this episode, we'll introduce, explain, and analyze one of the features in Canva AI called Canva Code. We'll also share 10 ways that teachers can use it to help spark your creativity when it comes to this exciting new feature. This is another episode you don't want to miss. Check it out.
Alright, we are back with another episode. This is one that Nick was hoping to get out like a month ago. He's been so excited about the topic that he was like, let's do a Canva Code episode, like almost every day, 28 days straight. And now it's time.
Here we are. The episode is happening. I did get excited because one of the things we hope to get across is with Canva Code, and I know a lot of teachers hear that and immediately write it off because of the word code. And you might be saying, why do I need code? I teach, third grade, or I teach middle school science, or I teach geometry. I don't do any coding. So it's a poor term because what it really allows you to do is anything you can think of when it comes to online games, apps, simulations, websites, really anything interactive online. You can, if you could describe it with an AI prompt, it can code it and then it exists. You can basically create anything, really. That's kind of the way I've been explaining it to people. So we'll kind of get into the episode here by introducing it as if you haven't seen it before. We'll try to do that relatively fast because I'm assuming if you're a listener to our show, then you are likely already aware of this. And then we'll get into our second segment, which will be ideas. Because one of the other problems teachers can have with Canva Code is, oh wow, that's super cool, but what am I going to actually create with that? So we hope to just spark some creativity with those ideas. First, we'll start from the top and tell you exactly what it is from the beginning. This is as described by Canva. It writes code for you to create specific games, apps, simulations, etc., because that list goes on and on, really anything interactive and online. And that code can function both in Canva, so you can publish it straight on from Canva's website as a website, a Canva website, or you can copy paste the code and put it elsewhere. If you've got your own website, you can, I believe the code is HTML, you can copy paste that and put it other places you want. We even saw, guys found before the episode, you can take the code and embed that code within a Canva slide deck. So over the course of going through the slides, all of a sudden this interactive game that you've created is there on one of the slides as just a small piece of that. So you've got the code just right with that prompt. You can adjust it with other prompts. That's one of the things we're going to get into. And then publish it as you see fit. Again, the selling point here is for things that do not exist anywhere else. You can describe it and then it exists, at least in some form, right? So that's what's so cool about Canva Code as far as what it is. Maybe first we should go through some of the downsides just to get out of the way. One of them I'll do first and then I'll kick it over to you because I mentioned this already. But one of the downsides is the term Canva Code. That initial teacher response is, I'm not a computer science teacher. I don't teach coding, so this is not for me. That's not what this is. Canva Code is for everybody. It writes the code so that you don't have to know the code. So you can almost ignore that altogether. I wish there was like a better term for what it does. But it is actually writing the code, so I get it. But you kind of have to break through that barrier with people and let them realize that it's more than just, coding. It's creating things that you can think of.
Yeah, I'm just in awe by the endless possibilities that Canva Code can give educators, but really everybody out there. I don't know, it's mind-blowing. everything is just mind-blowing because I didn't really play around with it till this morning. And then when I started to play around with it, I'm just like, oh my God, this is like phenomenal. I mean, I know you're a big list person. One of the things that you could do is say, hey, create me a to-do list with a fun, awesome, interactive UI that gives you bonus points and a scoreboard every time you complete a task. So if you share the same thing, you could probably make it a two-player or two-person. So you and your wife, or me and my wife, or maybe you two versus us two. We have these tasks that we do, and we're competing against each other. And then you have a live interactive application that you can use that all four of you could see as you complete these tasks. It's just, that was me with my hands like exploding.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example. One of the things that can go, another downside that can go along with this is that it can take some time to get the code just right. The initial prompt that you try and the initial product that it gives you is very likely not the perfect final product. Like most times with AI, it takes some refining, right? You got to try once, ask it to change it slightly, ask it to change it again. So as you go to use it for the first time, make sure you're aware that the initial product might not be exactly as you envisioned. And in fact, there's like a character limit as you're creating the prompt. So if you try to put in a lot of detail initially, it might actually stop you. You might hit that limit. So you want to probably start with like a simpler prompt that just describes the basics of how you want it to function. What is the thing you want it to create? And then afterwards, adjust it with more specific details. Say the content isn't perfect, you can ask it to adjust the content in specific ways. Then usually like the last thing you would do is ask it to make it look the way you want it to look. So design features, colors, if you want it to be, look more like a high school game or simulation versus more elementary, or make it beautiful, right? Make it, you describe the design elements of the thing. So just realize that you're going to be prompting in layers until you get it just right. And then probably the last downside we'll get into here before we talk about why, some of the upsides of this would be, does it exist somewhere else? The temptation for people is going to be to go into Canva Code and make, let's say, flashcards. That's one of the things you could describe, by the way, is make a set of flashcards for X topic for 10th graders. And it'll do it, and they'll be cool, and they'll be interactive, and kids could click them, and they'll flip over for the other side. But the problem, I guess it's not a problem, but you got to ask yourself, with the things you're using Canva Code for, did I need to do this in Canva Code? Does that exist somewhere else? For example, if we have quizzes at our school, Quizzes has flashcards that I can tailor make myself. Quizzes has AI generated flashcards. Do I need to have Canva code a different version of flashcards? And the answer is probably not, right? You would use the tool that already exists for that. So I don't know if that's really a downside necessarily, but just be careful and think about what you might want to actually use it for. And that would be things that don't exist somewhere else, right? Some game or app or simulation you're envisioning that you can't find anywhere else. That's where Canva Code comes in. So those are some of the downsides we thought of.
See, what I was going to do is I was going to do a positive every time you did a negative, but since you took two in a row, kind of screwed the pooch on that one.
Gotcha.
So I'm going to just chime in and say, look, I don't mind, in prompt writing, I don't mind making tweaks and doing trial and error there because I feel like it makes it my own. Even though I'm using, code and AI and all that stuff, it's mine. Like, I didn't want that color scheme to be blue and black and silver. I wanted it to be, black, white, and Vegas gold. All right, which happens to be our school colors. Do not like the Vegas gold. But that is not the time and place. This is not the time and place for that. We won't go into that debate. But I guess what we're trying to say is that even though Canva is writing code for you and making an awesome product, there are going to be a lot of personalizational tweaks that you have to make to it. These tweaks they could be just small things, kind of something that you want to see, or they could be larger things. And some of the examples that we're going to get into in segment 2, you'll have to make tweaks. It's just part of the game. I would suggest doing something like this when you have something else on. Like, for example, when I go home at night and after sports and doing the kids' homework and bathing them and that whole rigmarole, I usually get creative with some downtime. I like to have my laptop on my lap. We may have a TV show in the background. I'm a big Survivor nerd, so last night it was Wednesday and it was on, so I had that on in the background, and I'm kind of just playing around with something creative, whether it's a t-shirt design or a lesson that I'm helping another teacher integrate technology into their classroom. But that's the time to mess around with Canva Code for the first time, I feel like, is when it's like no pressure, downtime. All right. And in this next segment, we are going to come up with, somewhere around 10 ideas for you to use Canva Code for things in your classroom and some tips and tricks along the way. So before we get into that, let's go and listen to a message from the Teacher Podcast Network.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcasts. Now let's get back to the episode.
Okay, so we are back for segment 2, the main segment, and this is really what I've been waiting for the whole time, because I think what it takes for a lot of teachers to get into this the way that we have is to just start hearing ideas so that you can say, oh, that idea would be really cool. I could use that for this thing that I've always wanted to do. Or it might just spark other things. So we're gonna, like you said before the break, we're gonna try to do 10 different things, 10 different ideas spread across subject areas and grade levels, just to hopefully spark that creativity for you. I'll add too at the beginning, and just a quick shout out to one of our fellow online EdTech presences by the name of Brittany Washburn, because some of the ideas that we're going to share we got from a website that Brittany had Canva Code create. So she went to Canva AI, put in a prompt that said, make a website about, and this website is a Canva Code designed website about Canva Code. So in and of itself is an example of what Canva Code can do. So I'm going to begin this whole thing by describing this website. At the top, there's a drop-down menu that you can click and select a grade level. And I'm doing this now too as I'm speaking to you guys. So I'm going to click 9 through 12 high school as the grade level. And then there's a subject area. So I'm going to choose science because I am a science teacher. And then what it gives me are different ideas for how to use Canva Code as a high school science teacher. It's showing me 4 different activities. That's, one really cool application of this because, as Brittany, I'm assuming, prompted Canva Code to design this website, all of this was done for her in advance, right? And now she's got this clickable product that others can use and share and get ideas from, like us, to create this show. If you can just think about the time savings that would do for you if you needed a website with some drop-down menus where students could select different categories and then get ideas, similar things happen. You could design, and because it's Canva and because it's AI, you could prompt it to look the way you want to look with, say, school colors or whatever it needed to be. So that's where we're pulling some of these from, including my first one. So I'll get started if you don't care. My first idea is an interactive periodic table. The prompt for that, we won't do this every time, but just to help you guys get started. The prompt for that, so if you were in Canva AI, something you could type to get this could sound like, create an interactive periodic table for insert grade level chemistry students. So let's say 10th grade chemistry students. When elements are clicked, display information about their atomic number, mass, electron configuration, and common uses. Include a search function in color coding by element categories. So the prompt can be as simple as that. Notice I've given it some specific direction on, yes, it's an interactive periodic table, but what's the interactive piece? Like, what are students actually gonna view when they click on one of those elements? For me, I would actually take it in a different direction, because remember, the point of this is to make something that doesn't exist anywhere else. And there's tons of interactive periodic tables on the website or on the internet. But what there's not any of is specifically interactive periodic tables that show only the representative elements. That's a certain grouping of elements. Those are the ones you typically focus on at the beginning of a chemistry class. So I want this to show only the representative elements, and specifically I want, when the students click on an element, to show the charge of that element and how the electron configuration leads to that charge. And that's the beauty of Canva Code, is I can now design the exact type of interactive periodic table that I need for a specific lesson to increase, you name it, pick the educational method, right? Blended learning, personalized learning. You could also build in specific differentiation to that interactive periodic table. So if you have a student that needs large text, you could say in the prompt, include a magnifying glass at the bottom, so when students click the magnifying glass, they can hover on the periodic table and it increases the size of whatever they're viewing. So specific differentiations built in as you need them to that thing is the beauty of this. So that's my first idea, interactive periodic table.
Yeah, I love that one. That one's pretty awesome. I'm going to go with an interactive worksheet for my first one, and I'll explain a couple different uses of this. For example, if going with Nick's periodic table, if you said that I wanted an interactive worksheet of the periodic table where I could drag the elements to where they're located on the periodic table, you can make that happen. So if I needed, let's see, carbon, for example, and its periodic number is what, 6?
Yep, very good.
And 12 for the mass if you round to the nearest whole number. Say you're working, instead of with the whole chart, you could just say, okay, I want 8 different examples of elements that are found on the periodic table, and I want numbers that I could drag into specific elements, on the periodic table. So maybe it gives you a template of the little rectangle, the vertical rectangle of carbon, and they have to drag the symbol, the name, the atomic number, and the atomic mass there. And then after they're done with that, they could say what group or what column it is found in, something along those lines. But you can do that with this code. Interactive worksheets could also be, picture any type of diagram. Say I have a chloroplast, in a plant cell, and I want them to label the different parts. You could easily do that. You're going to have to tweak it, but you could start with something. Create an interactive worksheet using a chloroplast where students will drag and drop correct labeling onto this diagram. And it will make that, and then you'll have to go back and make tweaks of it. So maybe as you drag and I haven't tried this yet, it would be cool as all get out if it works, but as you drag the correct label for that part of the chloroplast, it will shade in the color of that diagram, and let you know that it is correct. That would be another example of it. But I feel like interactive worksheets, you could do some pretty cool things with that. And you can make this a part of a website. So if you wanted to say, hey, I want to embed this into a current website and I need HTML code in order to do that, or I want an embed code so I can publish this on my website, you could ask for it and give it a shot, see if it works.
It's a great idea. There's so many directions you could take that. And again, could you make an interactive worksheet using a Google Doc? For sure. But can you make it as, you described, where there's a drag and drop onto a cell where, it changes color the moment you get it correct versus wrong? No, certainly not with as much ease as you can here with Canva Code. So it's a great example for that. My second one, I'm going to take a total left-hand turn here and go middle school art. So now I'm a middle school art teacher, and in this next example, I'm going to create a virtual lab about color theory. Color theory, if you don't know, is just like mixing colors in different ways and the products that you get from that and what they're called and what looks good together, what doesn't look good together. This could tie into like, if you're doing some sort of a class on digital branding or whatever it is, where you students have to learn about colors and what looks good and what doesn't. It's also a big part of art education, right, is color theory. So here's the prompt you could use for this virtual color theory lab. You could go to Canva Code and say, create a virtual color theory lab where students can mix primary colors to create a secondary color. Students can then mix those secondary colors to create tertiary colors as well. Include a color wheel reference challenges for them to match specific colors and information about color harmony with concepts such as complementary colors and analogous colors. So I want to highlight all of the details in there. So they've got a color wheel as a reference, helpful, nothing crazy. Challenges to match specific colors. So you would envision what this would probably be is, as you scroll down, there'll be like a grayish blue, right? And the challenge is for students to choose colors by clicking and moving and adjusting to mix certain colors to get as close to that blue as possible. How it indicates that, I don't know. If you didn't like the way that it indicated it, you could ask it to change that. Like you might say, for the challenge, and this would be an adjustment afterwards, for the challenge or the matching color challenge, indicate how close the student got to the color with a percentage. So if the kid is pretty close, it might say like, good job, you were 80% correct with your color matching, whatever. And it's teaching them, there's information there. However, it's given maybe something clickable so they can learn about complementary colors, analogous. Again, you can add additional layers to that after the fact. Like maybe the challenge is a summative quiz at the end where students can get some kind of a printout or like a summary of the challenges and how close they got, and that's what they turn in to you, the teacher, at the end of this whole thing. Just another cool example. I'm sure there's virtual color theory labs that exist on websites right now, but maybe you got to pay for them, and this you don't. Maybe they don't have exactly what you want in terms of the challenges that are presented to students. Maybe they're a little bit too hard, a little bit too easy. Now you can tailor it exactly as you need. So there you go, art teachers. We got an idea for you as well.
That one's super cool as well. I mean, for just to be able to take something that normally you would take a piece of paper, you'd probably take a crayon or a colored pencil and you would shade and do that. Now you're saving a little bit of time and the kids are still getting the same learning lesson out of it, which will allow you to either take that lesson and add on to it, add some type of extension piece, or you can move on to something else that you need to cover. So I'm just thinking not just in art, but in other curriculum areas where you're pinched for time, or maybe you're running up into a holiday break, like winter break or fall break or spring break, and you need to save a little bit of time there, but still get the concept across. This is a great way to do that. All right, my next one is near and dear to my heart. If you've listened over the past 190 episodes, 189 episodes, you'll know that I'm a big escape room guy. I love making these puzzles. And Nick kind of hinted towards this at the top of the episode, but I mean, you can make puzzles galore out of this and make it look good. So, for example, say that I wanted some type of word scramble. Now, word scrambles, they could look plain Jane. They can look, just 5 blanks, and then, with those 5 blanks, kids somehow get letters and they have to do a word scramble. But with Canva Code, you could say, hey, I want you to take on a lock puzzle for a classroom where every time they answer 5 questions, they get a hidden letter that pops up. And that hidden letter will use will be used later on to solve this 7-letter word lock. And I want this to be themed the Knights Templar. Or I want this to be themed like ancient Egypt. All right. And I want the background to be like that. I want there to be a dial that they could hit an up arrow or down arrow and it will change the letter that's behind it. And I want them to be able to know that they got it right by confetti being thrown. Now, that prompt would probably be too long for the initial prompt. So the key that I'm going to tell you right now, and this is with any AI prompt generator, anything that you use, just give it a little bit and say, please ask me any questions to clarify what I want at the end of that. And by doing that, it's going to remember everything you did, but now you're going to be able to ask more. And if you want to keep going, just say, ask me more questions for clarification to allow you to better serve the purpose that I described. All right, and it will keep doing that, and you just keep going. So if you don't want to hit enter and have it run through the whole code, just ask it to keep asking you questions. You'll answer them, it'll collect all that information, and then once you feel like you have a good starting point, say, okay, please start this process. But I'm telling you, you could get very creative with the puzzles. You can add the content later, have it make whatever it is that you want it to make, and then you could go in and say, hey, these are the types of questions that I want, copy, paste them in, and just have it do its work.
I think that's a good model for the prompting process here, is like get your initial prompt in there with the basics, then adjust the content specificity after that, and then end it with the visual. And I want to hit on one thing you said, which is your example said, make it ancient Egypt themed. The beauty of this is that if you needed a puzzle, but you were teaching a unit on, I don't know, like the Gilded Age, 1920s Gilded Age, so you wanted it to look like a 1920s speakeasy themed, right? You could request that in the original thing. So it's literally tailored to whatever you're teaching at that given moment. Just so cool. And I think, the puzzles and the escape room aspect of this is huge. My next example is for all the math teachers out there, and math teachers, I know you get frustrated sometimes because you feel like a lot of this AI stuff leaves you in the dust in terms of writing formulas, and how can that be, how can AI help students who are handwriting some work? I get it. But there are ways that you can use it, and this is maybe a game changer for you. Canva Code, math teachers, check it out. We're going elementary for this though. So for this example, I'm a 3 through 5, so like upper elementary, but elementary math teacher, and we are going to create a shape explorer, let's just call it. The prompt for this is going to sound something like this: create an interactive geometry explorer for, insert grade level, say 4th grade students, that focuses on 2D shapes and 3D shapes. And you could limit that if you don't want to get into 3D for whatever your group is. And then we're going to tell it to include specific things, like students can drag these shapes around, manipulate them, like with rotations or resizing. Students should be able to measure properties of the shapes. For example, angles, sides, area, etc. So there's different tools the kids can use to explore the shapes. Also explore transformations of those shapes. And then just a little bit of a design aspect at the beginning too, which you could do after the fact as well. But we can include one from the beginning. We'll also say, make it colorful and intuitive with clear labels for geometric terms. So that's your initial prompt, and you'll let it run for a couple minutes. And then, when you try this for the first time, you'll see that you can play with it, right? It shows you, okay, here's what we created from your prompt. So from this, you have to picture, let's just say, a pentagon that you can click, drag, move around, spin, rotate. There's a little measuring tool so that student could drag in and measure the angles within a pentagon. They can measure the area of that pentagon. As they expand, click and drag to increase the size of the pentagon. They can see how the area changes, right? All these different exploratory tools to teach them or have them notice things about these shapes and learning them for the first time. So Obviously super cool, super interactive, super student-centered when done the correct way. And we've got a really fun idea for the math teachers out there.
Another awesome use of Canva Code. I'm going to get into another one. This won't be long. It's really an idea to explore. And once again, I'm very big into gamification, and I love leaderboards, but make a live leaderboard that you can publish or you can show your students as they're completing tasks. So mine would be make a leaderboard, and then based on what I'm teaching, I would ask it to somehow have a theme around that. And then I would just keep tweaking it. But leaderboards are, sometimes people are intimidated by leaderboards, just making them. I used to use flippity.net for all my leaderboards, but now I think there's more customization aspects using Canva Code, so I'm going to give that a shot.
It's a great idea, and I might actually steal that because right now I'm keeping track of student times, like team times in a game we're playing, and I just use like a Google Sheet, which obviously in terms of ease for me is a great option because all I have to do is go there and start typing in the team's cumulative times. But if I wanted to enhance that, I could have Canva Code create, a leaderboard that maybe in the long run is easier for me. I could just set it up so that all I have to do is type in their daily times that they get, as it automatically tallies those times and produces some kind of a fun visual, right? So I enter the day's times and then it spits out like the new total times for everybody, and it shows it in a creative way. So is that more work than using a Google Sheet? Maybe, but is it more fun, and does it make that game more engaging in the moment for the students? Yeah, totally. So it might be a choice that you make at some point. Okay, my next one, we're going back to high school. So now I'm a high school language arts teacher, and the prompt I'm going to use here is for we'll call this an interactive poem creator. Lots of these exist online. There's lots of writing guides online, right? That's one of kind of the bread and butter of AI is writing. But here's where Canva Code might come in. My prompt would say, create an interactive poem creator for insert grade level. So let's say 9th grade students, that guides them through writing. And that's the key, and the benefit of this is that it's not writing the poem for them, which they might want to use like ChatGPT for. This guides them through the writing using blank. And the blank is where you insert whatever type of poetry you want. Or if there's multiples, like let's say they can choose or have to eventually do all three. They do a haiku, a limerick, and a sonnet, as an example. Maybe there's a drop-down menu at the top where they select haiku, and then that brings them to a page where they're prompted on how to write a haiku. Then they change the drop-down to the limerick setting, and they go to a different page where it guides them how to do the limerick. The key is guides them, so it's not writing it for them. Here's more of the prompt to increase the specificity to things you won't find in other writing guides online, like include templates to show the structure of that poem type. Include word banks to help students with inspiration and rhyming assistance. Also include the ability to illustrate completed poems. So that's a huge takeaway from this. Illustrating whatever poem has been completed. We're going to end it with make it visually appealing and age appropriate. I'm going to add one final thing to that, which might not fit in the original character limit. Include an export as PDF button at the end so that all of the poems that students have written get exported as a PDF when they click that button, and then that PDF is what gets submitted to you. That's one of the options that you can include here. So all the input that students have done within this app, let's just call it, is then exported to an easy to, let's just say submit format like that PDF. So that's a way that our English teachers can maybe use AI in a productive way rather than worrying about students using it to just do the writing for them.
Yeah, I love the fact that you kind of mentioned in a roundabout way that teachers can use these code apps to make exemplars or models of what they're doing in the classroom. And I think that's something that I would definitely take away from this. All right, getting into my fourth one, just sometimes coming up with a way for your classroom website to look, now that Canva Sites has kind of worked out any of the initial bugs that it had, and it's very simple to use and customize and things like that, wouldn't it be cool if you could just make a Canva Code prompt to get it to kind of do the layout for you? All right, please make me a history, teacher, Civil War themed website that has the following parts: battles, interactive maps. You can put these different things in there that you can then work around or work on as you complete your website. I'm making 3 websites right now, and these are all, it's not for my classroom, but it's for a classroom activity. So for example, one of the websites is for a amazing race in science. All right. I don't teach this class. I'm just collaborating with someone. They wanted to end the year activity that they can work on for the 4 days after their final. So we are making an amazing race, and I think it's going to be pretty cool, and going to actually start using Canva Code to make the leaderboard and some of the things that I would normally have to do, and it's going to take me a lot of time. I might play around just to see if I can make it work out, at least for this first year. So classroom websites for activities, like activity websites, because sometimes it's just cool to make a website for your activities. For those of you who don't know, if you do a presentation, it's basically this Canva medium that is stacked on top of one another, and you go from one to the next to the next. But if you kind of wanted to display everything, that's what a Canva website is. It's kind of like a slide that is stacked on top of a slide vertically, so you can get a one-stop shop type feel for the whole activity. And I kind of like that for some of the activities that we do.
It's a great idea, and we don't give websites a lot of attention because there's so many ways to make them that have been around for so long. Like Google Sites is a can't miss. It just makes it so easy. But the ease of this and the specificity and how fast it can design the whole website top to bottom could be a game changing for people too. I'll get into my final selection, the 5th, and this is going to sound weird. Hear me out. This is a teacher tool, so not for students. This is for us. An interactive classroom timer. And I know your immediate response is, why would you do that? There's so many classroom timers that are out there, including just, and even the one I typically use is I just go to Google, because we're a Chrome school, so that's when I open a new tab, it's a Google search page. Type in timer, I get Google Chrome's timer, done, and it's over in seconds. Here's the problem. How many times have you tried to use a timer or substitute any tool similar to that, like a stopwatch or whatever, the Google's calculator, and it doesn't have specific things you're looking for, and you say to yourself, boy, I wish this timer had, X, whatever that is. There's nothing you can do about it because you can't adjust that. But now you could go to Canva Code and prompt it with this. Create an interactive classroom timer with visual countdown displays. Include preset options for common activities like test time that lasts for 58 minutes, group work that lasts for 20 minutes, brain breaks that last for 5 minutes, with customizable time settings, optional sound alerts, and visually engaging animations. Make it large enough to be visible across a classroom and easy to operate. So now, picture your own classroom timer that you designed with preset things that happen in your class, like tests, group work, brain breaks, that you can publish as a Canva website, that you can then bookmark at the top of your Chrome browser. And now, anytime you need a classroom timer, it's yours with all of the preset options that you designed. And it's just as easy and fast to get to because it's been published as a website that now just lives on, forever. And I just think it's super cool. And I'll end it with, because you'll do your last one next. This is where Canva Code will live for teachers is, yes, these tools exist elsewhere, but Canva Code allows you to create tailored versions that other tools might not. I started this whole thing with quizzes, flashcards already exist. Why would I have Canva Code make its own flashcards? Well, maybe quizzes, flashcards, you really wish they had the ability, for students to say click some sort of a manipulative that they can, work with a 3D shape of a molecule within the flashcard. That's not an option in quizzes, but you can describe that to Canva Code and it can build it for you. So it's really the customization that makes these things special. And I think my last one's a good example of that. I'll let you wrap it up with your fifth one and close it out, my friend.
Yeah, I do like the personalization that you could do to these timers. I think it's a nice added touch and it doesn't take a lot of extra effort. So I wanted to say that before I got into my last one. And my last one is a to-do list, but a little twist on it. All right, so I always have to-do lists, but I keep them in my head. Nick has to-do lists for his to-do list.
That's right.
So one thing that I often struggle with is prioritizing certain things. Usually I just have this list in my head. I may jot it down from time to time, but the thing that I think the most about usually is the most important, and then some of the other stuff kind of goes by the wayside a little bit until I get to them. But sometimes I want to know, like with my deadlines and everything, I want to know how far out I need to worry about these things. So if it's something that's not due for 2 weeks, if I made a to-do list using Canva Code, I could say if it's over a week out, color code it yellow. If it's within 3 days, color code it orange. And if it's due within the next day or two, color code it red. And I think that's a great way of staying organized. Another thing I like to add to that is being able to add resources. For example, if I have a Google link to something that I want to add to it, I could say in my code, please hyperlink the following Google code to that to-do list item, and it will do that. All right, so I think that would be a solid one. That's what I'm going to end it on because, organization is something that I don't want to say I struggle with. I'm just organized differently. I'm wired differently. I admit it. I'm 5 fries short of a Happy Meal, and I take great pride in my ability to be disorganized chaotically, but organized at the same time. You could take that for what it's worth. Think about it. Let that marinate for a little bit, and then just realize that I kind of am like a modern art masterpiece. All my ideas are little paintballs that you throw against the wall, and whatever sticks and splats, that's what you get. So that's going to wrap up this episode, and I'm going to leave it at that. Make sure that you're following us on all the socials. Make sure that you are subscribing to the YouTube channel. We're going to probably add a couple videos on Canva Code there that you would want to check out. And, make sure that if you have time and you're liking the content, that you go over to Apple or anywhere that you could leave a review and leave us a review. Until next time, go check out Canva Code. Thanks for listening to the EdTech Throwdown. Do us a couple of favors. Subscribe to our podcast on any major podcast catcher such as Apple, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, and Stitcher. Go over to YouTube, search the EdTech Throwdown, subscribe to the channel. You can connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. The show's handle is EdTech Throwdown. You can connect with Geis at GeisGotTech, Nick at NickGotTech. You can write us an Apple Podcast review. You can tell your friends about www.edtechthrowdown.com. And lastly, go over and check out our friends over at the Teach Better Podcast Network, a network that we are so proudly involved with. Until next time, remember, go try some EdTech because we will do the research so you can teach your class.